The sterile halls of the VA hospital were filled with a quiet tension. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, checking on the veterans who were recovering, their faces somber, each carrying the weight of their battles. In one of the rooms, Sergeant Emily Carter lay in her bed, eyes closed, fighting a different kind of war now, a relentless battle against cancer. The wounds from her time in the service still ached in her bones, but the fight against the disease had drained her, both physically and emotionally. That morning, there was a shift in the usual rhythm of the hospital. The air was thick with anticipation. A motorcade was seen arriving, and soon the unmistakable figure of President Donald Trump walked through the door, his presence commanding attention. He wasn't here for a typical visit. There was something more personal about this one. "Sergeant Carter," Trump greeted, extending his hand with a firm grip. Emily, surprised but not shaken, looked up at him from her bed. "Mr. President," she said quietly, her voice thick with exhaustion. Trump studied her carefully, noticing the weariness that only someone who had been through the worst of wars would carry. "I've heard a lot about you, Sergeant," he said, his voice sincere. "You've given everything for this country." Emily offered a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't do it for the thanks, sir," she replied softly. "I just did my job." Trump pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "And now, you're doing a different job. You're fighting for your life." Emily looked away, focusing on the view outside her window. "I've been in battles before, but this is different. At least in war, I had a purpose. Here, I'm just another patient." Trump leaned in slightly, his usual confident demeanor softened. "That's exactly why I'm here. To remind you that your fight isn't over." Emily turned her gaze back to him, her skepticism evident. "You don't understand, Mr. President. I've spent years fighting. I've seen things, done things that most people can't even imagine. And now, I'm just stuck." Trump's expression shifted, no longer carrying the usual political poise, but something more grounded. "I can't pretend to know what you've gone through, but I do know this. The fight you fought for this country doesn't end when you leave the battlefield. It changes shape, but it's still there." For a moment, Emily was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. She had heard similar promises before, but there was something in Trump's voice that made her wonder if this time would be different. "You're still a soldier, Emily. You still matter," Trump continued, his gaze unwavering. A bitter chuckle escaped Emily's lips. "It doesn't feel that way. I came home, but nobody really cares. I feel like I've been forgotten." Trump nodded, a hint of determination flashing in his eyes. "You're wrong. I won't let you be forgotten. You deserve better than that. And we're going to make sure you get it." Emily blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "What do you mean?" she asked. Her curiosity piqued despite herself. Trump's voice became more resolute. "We're going to build something that helps people like you. A program that gives veterans the support, the care, and the purpose they deserve. You've been through hell, but you don't have to fight alone." Emily stared at him, a mix of disbelief and hope bubbling up inside her. Could this really be happening? Could someone actually be offering something real for once? "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump smiled, the warmth of his response carrying a promise. "I need your story, your voice. This program can't just be another idea. It needs to come from people like you. You've lived it, Emily. And now, you can help others who are still lost in the dark." Emily took a deep breath, the weight of his request sinking in. For the first time in a long while, she felt something shift inside her, a spark of purpose, a flicker of hope. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I'll help." Trump stood up, adjusting his tie as he prepared to leave. "This is just the beginning." And together, We'll make sure no veteran is left behind." As Trump exited the room, Emily sat there, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so long feeling lost, disconnected. But now, she had a reason to fight again. Maybe the war wasn't over. Maybe it had only changed its form. The next day, Emily woke to murmurs among the hospital staff. The president had kept his word. A new program was in place, one that would connect veterans with jobs, mentorship, and a sense of purpose once more. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. "All right," Emily muttered, her hand gripping the edge of her bed. "Let's do this." Later that afternoon, she was on the phone, speaking to other veterans, making sure they knew about the program. The spark of hope she had felt was spreading to others, veterans who had also been forgotten, who now had a chance to stand tall once more. Weeks passed, and the program grew, gaining traction as more veterans came forward, seeking the support they so desperately needed. Emily found herself at the forefront of this movement, helping others find their way. The fight had shifted, but she was no longer fighting alone. One evening, Trump called again. "I heard about what you've done, Emily." His voice carried pride. "You've made a real difference. You've given these men and women a future." Emily exhaled, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. "We've all made a difference," she corrected him. Together. A year later, Emily stood beside Trump at a national event honoring veterans. The applause filled the room, but all she could think about was the lives that had been changed. The men and women who had once felt forgotten were now standing strong again, ready to fight for their futures. Trump stepped up to the microphone. "This all started with one visit, one conversation, and now it's a movement that will last forever. Sergeant Carter, thank you for showing us all what courage truly is." As the crowd stood, applauding, Emily whispered to herself, "Thank you, sir." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. Her fight hadn't ended. It had just begun. A year later, Emily woke up early in her hospital room. As she turned toward the window, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the room, and the distant city skyline stood out, vivid and sharp against the morning sky. Life outside was moving on, but for the first time in a long while, Emily felt that she could be a part of it. Days were passing quickly, and the program they had started was growing. Every day, Emily received new requests for support from veterans, and she worked tirelessly to guide them toward the help they needed. Seeing the hope in their eyes fueled something deep inside her. She was no longer just a survivor of her own battles. She was part of something bigger. She was making a difference. One evening, Emily received a call from her team. "The president's coming back tomorrow," her colleague said, his voice tinged with excitement. "But this time, he wants to see the results. He wants to see how the program's been working and hear from the veterans themselves." For a moment, everyone fell silent. This visit would be different. It wasn't just another photo op or speech. The president was coming to see the impact, to see the lives that had changed because of their efforts. Emily could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the future of countless other veterans who were still struggling. The next day, as the motorcade pulled up to the hospital, Emily felt a familiar tension in the air. This time, though, it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. She stood alongside the other veterans who had become part of this movement, each of them anxious but determined. This was their moment. When President Trump walked into the room, his gaze swept over the soldiers and their families. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, but there was something different in his demeanor. This was no longer just a leader fulfilling an obligation. He was here as someone invested in their future, in their healing. "Emily," Trump said, nodding toward her with a rare sincerity in his eyes, I'm proud of what you all have done. You've shown this country that you're more than just soldiers. You're leaders. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady but full of emotion. We're not done yet, Mr. President. We're just getting started. This isn't just about the help we've received. This is about making sure that no one else has to feel forgotten the way so many of us have. Trump's eyes softened. I promised I wouldn't forget you. And I meant it. I'm here because I believe in what you're doing. This is something that's going to keep growing. You've got my full support. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt that the world outside wasn't an empty place. It wasn't just a place where people moved on after the sacrifices made by soldiers. Now, there was action. There was change. And for once, it felt real. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Emily and the team worked with hospitals, businesses, and local organizations to expand their support network. They connected veterans with mentors, jobs, and resources they needed to rebuild their lives. They fought for each other now, in a way that no one had ever fought for them before. One evening, as Emily was preparing to leave the hospital for the night, her phone rang. It was Trump again. Emily, I've heard about the progress. I'm impressed. You're doing incredible work. Emily felt a lump in her throat. We're just getting started, Mr. President. But it's working. We're getting veterans back on their feet. Trump's voice was firm, but filled with pride. This isn't just about one program, Emily. This is about a movement that will change how this country treats its veterans. I want this to go nationwide. The words hit her like a wave. A nationwide movement. What they had started in one small hospital could now grow to reach veterans all across the country. She had always dreamed of making an impact. But this was something she had never imagined. You've given these men and women a future, Trump continued, and we're going to make sure every single one of them gets the chance they deserve. Later that evening, Emily sat by the window again, looking out at the lights of the city. She had spent so much of her life wondering what her future held, if it even had one. Now, for the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem so uncertain. It felt like it was something she could shape. The following day, she gathered the veterans in the common room, her voice filled with new energy. We're not just surviving anymore, she said, her words strong and clear. We're building something real, something that lasts. Corporal Diaz, who had become one of her closest allies in this fight, raised an eyebrow. What's next, Sergeant? Emily smiled, a sense of purpose radiating from her. We keep fighting. For each other. For every single veteran out there who doesn't think anyone cares. We don't stop until no one's left behind. The room fell silent for a moment, and then slowly, everyone nodded. This was their mission now, to make sure that no veteran ever had to feel forgotten again. A week later, Emily received news that one of the veterans they had helped, Private Harris, had secured a job training service dogs for other veterans. When he spoke in front of the group, his voice trembling with emotion, Emily's heart swelled with pride. I thought my life was over after my injury, Harris said, his eyes shining. But now, I have a purpose again. I'm not just surviving, I'm living. Emily clapped him on the back. This is just the beginning, she said. And for the first time, it felt like she meant it. Months passed, and the program expanded. Veterans from all over the country reached out for guidance and support. Emily continued to lead with a steady hand, and with every success, the hope grew stronger. One evening, President Trump called again. I want you to know, Emily, that what you've done, what you and these veterans have done, is something truly remarkable. You've saved lives. Emily's voice was quiet, but resolute. No, Mr. President. We saved each other. And with that, they both knew it was far from over. A year later, at a national event honoring veterans, Emily stood beside President Trump once again. As the applause filled the room, she looked out at the sea of soldiers, men and women whose lives had been changed by their shared mission. Trump took the microphone, his voice strong and proud. What started with one visit, one conversation, has turned into something much bigger than any of us could have imagined. This is a mission that will live on forever. Emily's chest tightened as she listened, but her heart swelled with pride. They had done it. They had turned a single moment into a movement that would carry on, long after they were gone. As the applause echoed in the hall, Emily stood there, overwhelmed with emotion. She had fought her own battles, but now, standing among hundreds of veterans whose lives had been changed, she knew the fight hadn't just been for survival. It had been for each other, for hope, for a future. Have you ever felt forgotten, lost in the shadows of your own struggles? Sometimes, all it takes is one conversation, one person who believes in you, to spark a fire that changes everything. What if that moment is waiting for you right now?